It's 6:47 a.m. Your alarm went off 9 minutes ago. You're standing in your kitchen in the dark, staring at a machine, waiting for it to finish making the one thing that will let you function today. You haven't said a word to anyone yet. You can't. Not until this cup is in your hand. You take the first sip, and something in your chest finally loosens. For a second, you feel like a person again. Here's the question that should terrify you a little. What did every single human being who ever lived do for 300,000 years before this molecule existed? No coffee, no espresso machine, no energy drink, no pill. How did they get out of bed? How did they hunt for 6 hours on an empty stomach? How did they not just collapse? The answer is going to change the way you drink that cup tomorrow morning. And it's going to explain something about your 3 p.m. crash that no barista has ever told you. Caffeine is, by most measures, the most widely used psychoactive substance on the planet. Billions of people depend on it daily just to reach a baseline version of themselves. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Caffeine, as a drink, is almost embarrassingly recent. The popular story starts with a goat herd named Kaldi somewhere in the highlands of Ethiopia. Legend has it, his goats started dancing after eating red berries off a certain shrub. So Kaldi tried them himself, felt the same jolt, and brought them to a local monk. It's a good story. It's also just a legend, first written down centuries after it supposedly happened. Here's what's actually documented. According to the most thorough historical review of the evidence, there is no confirmed record, historical or archaeological, of anyone brewing and drinking coffee before the 1400s. The first solid evidence comes from Sufi monasteries in Yemen, where monks roasted and brewed the beans to stay awake through entire nights of prayer. From there, it spread fast Mecca, then Cairo and Damascus, then Istanbul by the mid-1500s, carried along trade and pilgrimage routes. It didn't reach Europe until the mid-1600s, arriving in cities like Venice and London as an exotic, faintly suspicious import. The first coffee houses in Europe opened barely 350 years ago. So if coffee has existed as a drink for roughly 600 years, and modern humans have existed for roughly 300,000, coffee has been part of human life for about 0.2% of our existence. It isn't ancient. It isn't even old. It's a recent import that arrived after the wheel, after writing, after most of the empires you learned about in school. For the other 99.8%, your ancestors woke up, worked, hunted, walked for miles, and stayed sharp enough to survive without a single milligram of caffeine. So what were they actually running on? The answer starts inside your own body, in a system so old it doesn't even need coffee to work. It's just been buried under one. In 1997, researchers led by Clemens Kirschbaum at the University of Trier in Germany documented something remarkable. In the first 30 to 40 minutes after you wake up, your cortisol levels, the hormone tied to alertness, focus, and energy, spike by 50 to 60%. Scientists now call it the cortisol awakening response. It's essentially a built-in stimulant. Your body manufactures its own wake-up drug every single morning for free. But here's the part that matters. This system evolved to respond to two triggers: natural light hitting your eyes and movement. Your ancestors woke with the sun. They stepped outside. They moved almost immediately, walking to water, building a fire, checking the group. That combination of light and motion switched their internal stimulant on at full strength. You wake up in a dark room. You reach for a glowing screen 6 inches from your face. You sit down. You stay sitting. You've effectively unplugged your own built-in coffee machine and then wonder why you need an external one to compensate. And it's not just light, it's food. For most of human history, the first meal of the day was protein and fat, leftover meat, marrow, nuts, slow-burning fuel that keeps blood sugar steady for hours. Your first meal today is probably cereal, a pastry, or nothing at all until the coffee itself does the job instead. A quick sugar spike followed by an equally quick crash. Right around the time your natural cortisol surge is already fading. You're stacking 2 energy dips on top of each other before 10 a.m., and calling the second cup necessary. Here's the twist nobody expects. Your ancestors weren't just avoiding fatigue with morning light. They were generating energy through the one thing you associate with using it up: movement itself. In 2004, biologists Dennis Bramble and Daniel Lieberman published a landmark paper in the journal Nature. Their argument: the human body isn't built like a sprinter's. It's built like an endurance machine, long legs, an Achilles tendon that stores and releases energy like a spring, a body covered in millions of sweat glands to dump heat while moving for hours. Humans are physiologically one of the best long-distance endurance animals on Earth, built specifically to run prey into exhaustion over hours, sometimes an entire afternoon, in what researchers call persistence hunting. That should sound impossible to you. You feel wrecked after 20 minutes on a treadmill, but your ancestors' bodies didn't experience sustained movement as draining. They experienced it as the thing that kept them alert. Moving muscle pumps oxygen and glucose straight to the brain. It triggers the same alertness chemistry your coffee is chasing. You've been taught that energy is something you spend by moving and refill by resting. Your ancestors' bodies did the opposite. Stillness was the drain. Motion was the fuel. That single reversal explains something you've probably felt but never named: the sluggish, foggy feeling that shows up after a whole day at a desk, even though you technically did nothing. Nothing is exactly the problem. Your body evolved to read hours of stillness as a warning sign, not a reward, and it responds by dimming your alertness, not boosting it. Now, that doesn't mean your ancestors never looked for a chemical edge. They did, just not the way you'd think, and not nearly as early as you'd assume. Long before coffee, isolated cultures across the world independently discovered their own local stimulant plants and reached for them in almost identical ways. In the Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, people chewed the leaves of the cat plant, which contains a naturally occurring amphetamine-like compound. The earliest solid documentation of this dates to the medieval period, centuries before coffee ever reached the same region. In West Africa, traders chewed kola nuts for their sharp, bitter jolt of caffeine, carrying them across the continent along ancient trade routes long before Europeans ever tasted one. Centuries later, that same nut would end up as the flavoring and the namesake of a soft drink invented in 1886. Across Asia and the Pacific, communities chewed betel nut for its mild stimulant buzz, a habit that's still visible today in the reddened teeth and lips of chewers from India to the Philippines. In China, practitioners of traditional medicine used a shrub called ephedra or ma huang for thousands of years. It wasn't originally used to fight fatigue. It was prescribed mainly to open the airways, but its stimulant side effect on alertness was noticed and recorded early on. In the Amazon, the Guarani cultivated guarana, a berry that carries more caffeine gram for gram than a coffee bean itself. Further south, in what's now Paraguay and Argentina, the same Guarani people were brewing yerba mate, steeping the leaves of a local holly tree into a bitter, energizing drink shared from a single gourd, generations before any European ship reached that coastline. In the Andes, coca leaves were chewed to fight altitude fatigue and hunger, letting people work and travel at elevations that would leave an unacclimated body gasping. Different continents, no contact with each other, the same discovery over and over, a plant that sharpens the mind. That convergence tells you something. Humans have always looked for a chemical edge when their environment demanded more than their bodies could naturally supply. But notice the pattern. Every one of these traditions is tied to settled societies, agriculture, or trade routes. None of them reach back into the deep hunter-gatherer past. For the vast majority of human history, the 300,000 years before farming, before writing, before any of this, no chemical stimulant existed at all. Your ancestors' entire energy system ran on light, movement, food timing, and rest. Nothing else. So what actually kept them going hour after hour, day after day, with nothing to drink but water? Rhythm. Ancient humans didn't fight fatigue. They obeyed it. Work happened in the morning when cortisol and body temperature were naturally climbing. The most physically demanding hours were finished by early afternoon, not because they were lazy, but because human alertness naturally dips after midday, a biological low point still measurable in every human being on Earth today. Coffee or no coffee. Ancient humans rested through it instead of overriding it with a stimulant. Energy returned naturally in the evening, and they used it for something completely different. Talking, storytelling, connection around the fire, not more labor. You don't have that option. Your job doesn't care that your alertness naturally drops around 2 p.m. So you drink something to force your biology to ignore its own signal. It works for a while, but you're not adding energy. You're borrowing it from your own nervous system. And the bill always comes due, which is exactly why you crash by mid-afternoon anyway, no matter how much coffee you drink. Your ancestors weren't more disciplined than you. They weren't tougher. They simply lived inside a system that handed them free, built-in energy every single day. Sunlight, movement, and a rhythm they never had to override. You still have that system sitting inside you right now, this morning, unused. The cortisol surge is still there, waiting for actual daylight instead of a phone screen. The muscles built for hours of movement are still there. waiting for you to move instead of sit. Tomorrow, before you reach for that cup, step outside first, just for 2 minutes. Let real daylight hit your eyes. Walk, don't scroll. You won't feel it happen. But somewhere in a part of your brain that is 300,000 years old, a switch you forgot you had will quietly turn back on. In the next video, we're going deeper into that afternoon crash because there's a reason it hits almost everyone at nearly the same hour, and it has nothing to do with lunch.